The dining table had always been my family's favorite stage. It was where accomplishments were displayed like trophies and failures were served alongside the food, passed around without mercy. That evening, the long wooden table gleamed under the warm yellow light, heavy with dishes my mother had spent all day preparing. Roasted chicken, buttered bread, steaming vegetables, everything looked perfect. Everything except the knot tightening in my stomach. Family dinners were never simple gatherings. They were evaluations. I arrived a few minutes late, as usual, hoping to slip in quietly. My brother Daniel was already there, sitting confidently at the head of the table beside his fiancée, Lena. He looked successful in that effortless way that always earned him praise-tailored shirt, polished smile, loud laughter. My parents adored him. He made them proud without trying. I took the empty seat near the end of the table. My sister barely glanced at me before returning to her phone. No one asked how my day had been. No one ever did. So, my mother began once everyone had settled, cutting into the chicken with precision. How's work going for everyone? Answers flew across the table. Promotions, bonuses, deadlines. When the conversation reached me, there was a brief pause, like a forgotten line in a script. And you? My father asked, already knowing the answer. It's fine, I said quietly. Busy, Daniel snorted. Busy doing what? Writing again. The word writing landed like a punchline. My sister smiled, already anticipating the joke. Oh, that little hobby, my mother said, shaking her head with a soft laugh. I thought you would have grown out of that by now. I forced a polite smile and focused on my plate. I had learned long ago that defending myself only fueled them. Silence, at least, ended faster. My father leaned back in his chair. We just worry about you. You're too old to be chasing unrealistic dreams. Daniel raised his glass. Here's to someday getting a real job. Laughter followed, light, careless, cruel. I felt heat rise to my face but kept my head down. None of this was new. I'd heard it all before, how my passion was impractical, childish, embarrassing. How I was wasting time, how I would regret it. Across the table, Lena didn't laugh. I noticed it because she was the only one who didn't. She watched me carefully, her eyes thoughtful, as if she sensed something the others didn't. So you write stories? She asked gently. Before I could answer, my sister jumped in. Stories, poems, nonsense, same thing, it doesn't pay the bills. My mother sighed. We just want what's best for you. Stability matters. The word stability echoed in my mind. Stability had always meant obedience in this family, following the path they approved of, even if it hollowed you out inside. Daniel smirked. Honestly, if passion paid rent, everyone would be an artist. I clenched my fork. For a moment, I considered speaking up, telling them about the late nights, the rejections, the small victories they never noticed. But I knew how it would end. They would dismiss it. They always did. So I stayed quiet. Lena looked between us, confused by the tension she clearly hadn't expected. I didn't mean to pry, she said softly. I just think it's brave to keep creating when people doubt you. The table went awkwardly still. Compliments weren't welcome here. At least not for me. My mother cleared her throat. Well, bravery doesn't pay bills. More laughter followed, but it felt thinner now. I stared at my plate, appetite gone, listening as the conversation moved on without me. Plans, weddings, future homes. A future I apparently didn't belong in. Yet beneath the humiliation, something steady burned quietly inside my chest. They could mock my little hobby, all they wanted. They could laugh and belittle and dismiss me over dinner. They just didn't know what that hobby was about to do. And they certainly didn't know how close they were to the truth, or how quickly their laughter would disappear. That night, after the dinner laughter faded into the hum of the city, I sat alone in my small apartment with the lights off. The silence felt heavy, but it was a familiar weight, one I had carried for years. I rested my laptop on the table, its worn edges a quiet reminder of how long I had been doing this, how long I had been believing alone. Writing had never been a hobby to me. It was a lifeline. I still remembered the first time I told my family I wanted to be a writer. I was 17, heart racing, hands trembling as I explained how stories made sense of the world for me. My father had sighed, my mother had smiled politely, Daniel had laughed, "You'll grow out of it," they said. I didn't, instead, I grew into it. Into the long nights hunched over a keyboard while the rest of the city slept. Into the quiet rejection, emails that always started with "thank you for your submission." Into the self-doubt that crept in at 3 in the morning, whispering that maybe they were right. But every time I thought about quitting, something inside me refused to let go. I worked ordinary jobs to survive. Nothing impressive, nothing worth mentioning at dinner. By day, I answered emails, filed papers, smiled at customers. By night, I became someone else entirely, someone fearless, someone honest, someone who could say the things I never said out loud. I wrote under a pen name because anonymity felt safer. If I failed, no one would know, and if I succeeded well, success didn't feel real enough to imagine back then. The first book took 3 years to finish. 3 years of writing, deleting, rewriting, and starting over. When I finally held the printed copy in my hands, I cried not because it was perfect, but because it existed. Because I hadn't given up. I didn't tell my family, not after my mother asked when I'd move on. Not after Daniel joked about my fantasy life. Not after my sister suggested therapy instead of writing. When the first royalty payment came, small but real, I stared at the number for a long time. It wasn't life-changing, but it was proof. Then another book sold, and another. Reviews began to appear, strangers saying my words helped them through grief, loneliness, heartbreak. They thanked me for stories that made them feel seen. Those messages mattered more than any approval my family could give. Still, I stayed quiet. Part of me hoped that one day, without me explaining or proving anything, they would simply notice. That they would ask real questions instead of mocking jokes, that they would see me, but dinner stayed the same. The laughter, the pity, the disappointment disguised as concern, so I learned to separate my worlds. At family gatherings, I was the disappointment. At my desk late at night, I was someone who mattered. The contrast was exhausting, but it kept me safe. My success felt fragile, like glass. I didn't want their skepticism anywhere near it. I didn't want their approval if it came only after money or recognition. Yet sometimes, when I lay awake listening to the city breathe outside my window, I wondered how it would feel to be supported. To have someone ask how the book was going and actually mean it, that longing hurt more than the mockery. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, replaying the dinner in my mind. The jokes, the smiles. Lena's curious eyes. She had seen something different, and that unsettled me. For the first time, I sensed that the wall I had built might crack. Not because I wanted it to, but because the truth was getting harder to hide. I didn't know it yet, but my quiet, invisible world was about to collide with the one that had laughed at me for so long. And when it did, there would be no way to pretend my little hobby had meant nothing. The next family dinner arrived sooner than I expected. I almost didn't go. The memory of laughter still clung to me like a bruise, tender and unresolved. But something in me, perhaps stubbornness, perhaps a quiet readiness, pushed me through my parents' front door once again. The atmosphere felt different this time, tenser, as if the house itself sensed an approaching storm. Daniel was there, of course, confident as ever, retelling a story about work while everyone listened. Lena sat beside him, smiling politely, though her eyes drifted toward me more than once. Each time our gazes met, she looked away, thoughtful, as if fitting together pieces of a puzzle. Dinner was served, and the familiar rhythm resumed. Cutlery, chatter, casual judgments disguised as conversation. I stayed quiet, answering only when spoken to. I could feel something coiling in my chest, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation I didn't quite understand. "So," Daniel said suddenly, glancing in my direction, still writing. The table stilled slightly. It was the same question, asked the same way, with the same smug edge. Yes, I said. My mother sighed. You really are persistent. Daniel smirked, stubborn, more like. Before anyone could add another joke, Lena set her fork down. Can I ask something? She said. Her voice was calm, but the way she sat straighter made everyone look at her. Of course, my mother replied, smiling. What is it, dear? Lena turned toward me fully now. What do you write under? The question struck like a spark in dry grass. I hesitated just for a second. Daniel laughed. Oh, come on, Lena. It's just personal stuff, nothing published. Lena didn't laugh back. That's not what I asked. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. My heart pounded in my ears. I hadn't planned for this moment, hadn't rehearsed it. I had always imagined control choosing when, how, and if the truth ever came out. Lena reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I've been reading a novelist lately, she said slowly, someone who writes with a voice that feels familiar. My sister frowned. What does that have to do with this? Lena ignored her. She looked straight at me. Are you? She asked carefully, the author who writes under the name A.R. Vale. The sound of my mother's fork clattering against her plate echoed too loudly. Daniel froze. What? My father blinked. That's that author. Lena nodded. The one whose books are topping charts. The one Daniel recommended to me last month. Daniel shook his head, laughing nervously. No, that's impossible. All eyes turned to me. Years of silence pressed against my chest, heavy and fragile. I thought of the nights alone, the words no one had believed in, the dreams I'd carried quietly to protect them. Yes, I said softly, that's me. The silence that followed was absolute, my mother's face drained of color. Why didn't you tell us? I met her gaze, you never wanted to hear it. My father leaned forward, studying me as if I were a stranger. All this time you were successful. I nodded once. Daniel's voice was sharp. So you just let us think you were failing. I looked at him, calm but honest. You decided that for me. I didn't correct you. Alina exhaled slowly, awe softening her features. Your books helped me through a really hard time, she said. I can't believe you hid that. I swallowed. I didn't hide. I protected it. The table was no longer a place of laughter. It was a reckoning, and for the first time in my life, the truth sat there with me. Unapologetic, undeniable, and finally impossible to ignore. No one reached for their food after that. The dinner table, once so loud with laughter and judgment, had fallen into an uneasy stillness. I could feel their eyes on me, searching for the version of me they thought they knew. The struggling one, the disappointment, the joke, that version no longer fit. My mother was the first to recover. She forced a smile, the kind she used in front of guests. Well, she said lightly, you should have told us. We would have supported you. The words stung not because they were cruel, but because they were false. I don't think that's true, I replied gently. My father cleared his throat. You have to understand, we just wanted you to be secure. I wanted that too, I said. That's why I worked quietly, without permission. Daniel stared at me, his confidence cracking. All those times we joked, he trailed off, uncertain for the first time in his life. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Lena broke the silence. Do you know how rare it is to succeed at something everyone doubts? She asked the table. You should be proud. Proud. The word felt strange, almost foreign. My sister crossed her arms. So what now? You expect an apology? I shook my head. No, that surprised them more than anything else. I don't need one. I continued. I already made peace with who I am, without your approval. My mother reached for my hand again. This time I let her touch me, but I didn't hold on. We didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. I know, I replied, but you did. There was no anger in my voice, only truth. That was the sweetest part of it all. I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to prove anything. My success had already spoken, and it spoke louder than I ever could. Daniel looked away, jaw tight. For the first time, he wasn't the golden child. He was just a man realizing his jokes had cost him something. I stood and picked up my coat. I should go. So soon? My father asked. Yes. I said, I have a deadline. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. At the door, Lena stopped me. I hope you know. She said softly, your stories matter. You matter. I smiled genuinely this time. Thank you. As I stepped outside, the cool night air filled my lungs. I felt lighter than I ever had. Not because they finally knew the truth, but because I no longer needed them to. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Calls came in, invitations, praise disguised as curiosity. I answered politely, briefly. I set boundaries I never had before. I didn't flaunt my success. I didn't throw it in their faces. That was never my revenge. My revenge was peace. It was writing freely without shame. It was watching my family slowly realize they had misjudged me, and that they couldn't undo it with pride or praise. At the next dinner, no one mocked my little hobby. They asked questions instead, and for the first time, the table felt quiet not with cruelty, but with respect. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming everything they never believed you could be, and walking away with your dignity intact.